Welcome to Peninsula People. I'm David Hosley sitting in for Claire Mack, and as you probably guessed, today we're talking about how neighborhoods can respond to emergencies and some training programs going on here in San Mateo County. So welcome to our program. I'd like to introduce you to our guests today. First, we have Rick Reed of the Office of Emergency Services, and sitting to his left, Steve Cavallero, who is the Battalion Chief of the Redwood City Fire Department, and next to him, Pat Josias, who's with the City of San Mateo and is the Emergency Services Coordinator. Well, emergencies are something that from time to time people think about, but oftentimes we don't plan very well for it. And Rick, we have in the news recently a hurricane, and certainly in California we think about earthquakes and those kinds of things. But can you talk about the totality of what you try to do with the Office of Emergency Preparedness?
The San Mateo Operational Area Office of Emergency Services is a joint powers agreement with 20 cities in San Mateo County, serving all the 650,000 people who live here. A big part of what we do is planning and training, mostly training city staffs, planning for area-wide disasters. During a disaster, all the 20 cities staff up emergency operations centers, and then at the county government center in Redwood City, we have an emergency operations center that will coordinate with the 20 cities. Well, so our focus is on training those cities.
Let's talk about planning, then we'll go to some training. How do you try to coordinate efforts to plan for an emergency? What really does that enable, does that actually involve?
Well, it involves big plans, but it also involves relationships with people. And before we came on, the three of us were talking about how one of the biggest things that we do is develop relationships among the 20 cities so that we can partner during disasters, communicate better, share resources better, and therefore better serve the citizens in our cities.
And we have a relationship at KCSM and on SAMNet with your office, so that we especially will make every effort to provide information if there is an emergency to the people in San Mateo County. And that's important because when I was a newsman, San Mateo County oftentimes didn't get a lot of coverage where the focus might be where the stations were in San Francisco or San Jose. And if we go back to the Loma Freeway, much more San Mateo was the district in the Bay Bridge and the collapsed freeway over in the East Bay.
I'm glad you brought that up because the Area Office of Emergency Services and the 20 cities definitely value the relationship we have with KCSM because, as you said, we do know that in an area-wide disaster, when there's a cypress collapse or a marina fire going on, what's happening in San Mateo County might be comparatively minor as an interact, and so it's information to us.
Right. Now, when you talk about planning and relationships to agencies, who's involved in that? Clearly the fire departments would be, police.
Every city has named an emergency services coordinator, two of which are with us today.
Great.
And our job mission are also on the stations.
You're coordinating with hospitals,
schools, private industry, special districts, as well as state and federal governments.
I know from our stations we do have a plan at the College of San Mateo, and we review it from time to time to make sure that the staff know what we're supposed to do. And it's always interesting to see what happens. You can switch to that. What kind of training is your office involved in?
On an annual basis, we coordinate a 20-city and county emergency operations center exercise where we shake out those plans and actually put forth a emergency scenario and how to operate with the operational area staff of the county.
Okay, now let's look at some of the things that we might want to worry about when it comes to emergencies. We've got some video here that you can walk us through that talks about some of the disasters that have happened and the things that people would be concerned about. So let's take a look at that.
We can either video. Now, specific hazards in San Mateo County and in the ocean floor, seismic sea wave can be generated that won't crash on the beach, but will simply keep coming and keep going up to a quarter mile inland, and it's something we plan for in the coast.
Notification on the tide waves in Japan, and that there were some problems with the notification to warn people coming after the waves had crashed ashore. And so there really is a special effort here in California, particularly to make sure all of these systems are
after there's probably a month. There'll be a special announcement that'll come out to our office to let us know that there was or was not a tsunami generated from this earthquake.
Yeah.
So I think
emergency might have one.
and even more so on the bay side, even fewer people know of something called a SAISH, which if you picture an earthquake and a sloshing in a swimming pool, that's a similar action that we're going to see on the bay side. So,
people think about earthquakes going all the way back to the 1960s and then to the one that everybody remembers from here.
Sure. Of course, this is 1989, where we see people kind of running helter-skelter when the shaking starts. It's real important to point out that whenever shaking starts, people do
That's what I did right under my desk, and it was an amazing thing to be at a radio station at that time, have the station go off the air, and the announcer said, "I think there's a..." and we lost power and weren't back on the air for hours. Well, Steve, let's talk a little bit with you about how you're taking this down to the neighborhood level. And you're bringing from city
community groups, church groups, businesses for that first 72 hours, when essentially our message to people is, when the big one hits, and Loma Prieta was not the big one, that people will need to be self-sufficient for that first 72 hours. So we be self-sufficient that first and most critical 72 hours.
Did you say that we have not yet had the big one?
No, we have not yet. The experts are saying that while Loma Prieta was devastating, it is not the big one that some of the experts are anticipating.
Oftentimes we're prepared to deal with an emergency in the short term. I mean, the first few minutes or even hours.
Right.
And what I remember well about the 1999 experience was how long it went on. I was in San Francisco, and we get our back, and we upstairs to see it out of our. Well, then we had day after day after day, and finally at our station we ended up getting some counseling for the news people who had been reporting on all of this, and I suspect you might do that for emergency workers too. But most citizens think about getting in and that goes over time.
It goes over time, and the reason being, you mentioned the case of evacuation. Well, what happens when you can't get any further than the end of your block because live power lines are down, or the roads are damaged, or there's water main breaks, or trees collapse? I mean, the necessary will be coming into the area within the first 12 hours. An earthquake is of the nature where roadways are damaged for people who want to get from place to place, and also for emergency responders from areas not affected. Emergency services may be arriving to help the individual homeowner. Granted, in the case of like a Northridge apartment house collapse, emergency help was there within the first couple of minutes, and that was a really labor-intensive type of operation. For be ready so that they're better prepared to handle that time without emergency help.
Who participates in the NERT program?
Well, we've made it open to really any member of the community, any business or church group within Redwood City. So far, the people we've put through the program, I would say about 50% are actually persons who feel concerned to be as prepared as possible and have enlisted to take our program.
And how many years have you been doing this kind of thing?
Actually, we just started in October of '94 was our first class, so really less than a year. We're coming up 1 year. I hope that essentially somehow through preparedness we can lessen the amount of life loss in the community. We can better prepare people to be less of a drain on city service, more selfish, and something good for people in their general areas, because if they're waiting for police, fire, ambulance to arrive, it's going to be a while.
Yeah, it will be.
Right.
Now, Pat, you're involved in this.
Our program is called NEST. It stands for Neighborhood Emergency Services Team, and it's very similar to the program that Steve has described for Redwood City. We've been in operation for about 5 years, so we're kind of the parent to the program he's in his city. Our promise in the neighborhood to this school that are a place where people will come for information, and we want to make sure that the schools are prepared so that the community may use it as a shelter or an information place. And so we're working very closely with those organizations as well as the nonprofits community. So in our first aid communications activities that we design with training and a captain who leads that particular community group. And it may be a neighborhood association, it may be just one block. It could be an apartment complex. So it varies according to the number of people that would like to become involved in that particular neighborhood organization. So it's learned. when earthquake happens, and we had one in 1989 and our program was in existence, it was an opportunity for the neighborhood to come together with their captain leading to gather information of what the damage was in that particular neighborhood. And we treated 23 information will help understand the damage that has occurred throughout the whole city before we have time to even have our police officers or firefighters go up and down the streets. So yes, it is very effective in the gathering of information, but it's also very effective and was shown that people know what to do. They're not
Isn't what you do from plans we have in broadcasting to cover emergencies, but when you have a plan and have the opportunity to work that plan, then you go about your business and you tend to not be overwhelmed by this. In fact, through the people when you can practice and practice and practice when you come to an actual emergency, this is what you do. This is what you're trained for. All three of you are professionals who are prepared to go to work if there's an emergency.
Sure, and I think it's important to point out, David, that it doesn't have to be this way. So you work, I work in San Bruno. What happens if we're separated during the day? Who goes to pick up the kids? Just that level of basic planning puts you way ahead of what most people have done.
Well, people do think about their loved ones in an emergency, and that sometimes can make a very difficult decision to try to distance that when they get far. It may cause problems by trying to get there. And so it's good to have an agreement, a plan, and people know what's going on. We just moved, and one of the things that we did the other day, we have a 5-year-old daughter, and we talked about what to do in our house in an emergency. And a partner in that will be schools that also, of course, regularly train the kids on what to do if there's an emergency. But these kind of fundamental things really can make a difference. They can actually save your life.
Absolutely.
What do you
we try to give them to make them feel like part of the team. And so what you're showing is a shirt for the nest captain and participants so that they feel like they're part of the neighborhood organization. They're also easily identified as trained people, which is very helpful when police and fire people come into the scene. They say, this person knows what they're doing when they start giving me the example of communications present in neighborhood. That person would be neighborhood, get information in and out. And a person that would act as, in this case, a ham radio operator available to assist anyone in the city or the neighborhood themselves.
These hams are really important. When we're covering emergencies for news, we offer to on a ham or think about your electricity and make sure they're more reliable than they used to be, and sometimes they'll come back or not even go out. And in some places, like our station, we have emergency phones that will stay in service if the regular phones go out, so we can get in and out. But those ham operators have to communicate about what's happened, where they may need to have help, and all of that kind of stuff that can assist the kind of work you're doing and inform the public in general.
I think it's because systems crash, but we know that the elaborate public safety radio systems that we have today in place, while they may not crash, they will certainly be overloaded. And the amount of radio communication that we'll need in a good example is we had a boat of illegal immigrants land out in El Granada about a year ago, I think it was, and with the local cellular site with all their cellular phones. So all radio-based systems have their limitations, and that's certainly one of them.
Department,
of course, right. Fire department, we don't really put too many limits on what it is that we'll respond to help citizens. So while the majority of our calls are medical in nature, they know that's a little maybe to handle a problem because they're addressing more of a large-scale type of disaster. The day-to-day routine will change for folks, and I guess that's kind of our main message to get out. And your point about preparedness is 99% of the ball game. If you've got some kind of plan in place, if you can collaborate, chances of an incident increase greatly.
Pat, does your training program include medical training for people, first aid and so forth?
It gives basic CPR class or help individuals that they have at hand, some of the checklists and things that would help them. So as part of participants, we have a checklist of what they should do to prepare ahead of time as well as after an emergency. And then the yellow book is the captain's books. The person in charge needs to know what to do with each one of the committees, and the committees then have checklists so that they can prepare ahead of time and know what people through with those tasks. So these are real helpful handouts for the individuals.
Pat touched on something that I think is tremendously important. I'm a firm believer that we in the management of the community food and wash that in a earthquake or area-wide disaster in a major metropolitan area such as this, people aren't going to starve, they're not going to die of dehydration, but they will die of bleeding and broken bones and things. So my opinion is the number one most important thing we can be doing is that first aid and CPR training.
Oh, it's like leadership roles because they come into the these people who take make sure that things happen. How does that work?
Well, a captain usually self-selects themselves. It's a person who feels like they're motivated to prepare their neighborhood, usually because of themselves first, and they want to make sure and that they will be actively involved and keep having meetings with them.
And what about roles? Do you then go down in your training and assign people in a community to other things that they're in charge of, or try to develop special expertise about?
Try and give to the role and responsibility to naturally along with Pat, where some of the leaders of the community groups tend to be more or less the captains or the leaders when it comes time in place of the emergency, and then certain skills tend to lend themselves to certain abilities in the field, and as the disaster when so hats switch places based on what the occupations are of the people that have gone through the program.
How do you find this working when you know, you're trying to organize a large group of people as opposed to somebody just doing things all on their own? Really work out better when people are coordinated?
None of this will go from maybe basic of first aid skills. Anything to do with building collapse, how to search buildings that we teach some of our members, it's really a team concept. It's not based solely on the individual, and so we stress the importance of taking up more of it.
Now we have some information pages if people want to call up and make contact with you, so let's take a look at that on our screen. In Redwood City, you can call the Neighborhood Emergency Program. There's the phone number 470-400 and see what the number is there. There's the NEST program, and if you want to call 377-4668, you'll talk to Pat or somebody who works with her, and they'll get you all signed up. And so there's information for you. If you print bills, there's information. The people have taken a lot of time to put it together, and it's incumbent upon us to take advantage of it, use it, and hope that we never have to put it into effect. But we do live in California, and if you're old enough in California to have been around for a while, the things that you can do in an emergency can make a difference in saving lives in your community. And we've lived through a few of these here in the Bay Area, and we want to make sure that everybody is prepared as much as possible. I do want to repeat emergencies to get you emergency information about San Mateo County. So it's a good place to tune if there's something that actually does come up. You've been watching Peninsula People. I'm David Husley, sitting in for Matt.
Educational programming for San Mateo County, a service of KCSM Television in cooperation with the San Mateo County Cable Television Authority.